I'm Chris Stemler from Best Line Equipment. We're here today to talk about daily maintenance on a Bobcat track loader. Now, depending on what model machine you have, it could be Tier 4, interim Tier 4, so some things may be different on your machine. What we're looking at today is a T770, which is a Tier 4 model. So what I normally do is start at the back of the machine, open the back door, and we're going to be doing this from the perspective of an operator. So we're not going to get into things you need any major tools. This is all things you can do with basically a grease gun and a small wrench. So on the back of your machine, there's a service schedule on the back door, as well as in the operator's manual. You can also access that on your cell phone at bobcat.com. It's real simple. So on a daily basis, every 8 hours, you want to check your engine oil, which is similar to what you're going to do on your truck. Pull the dipstick out, make sure you have proper level of engine oil. The fuel filter, if you have an older machine, the fuel filter is going to be a small fuel filter, still has a water drain on the bottom. You want to do that water drain every day. This happens to be one of the Tier 4 filters. So there's a water separator. You can visually check if you have water in the system. And underneath there's a little petcock. You want to open that up till it drops down, which will drain the water out of the system. On Tier 4 motors especially, it's very important you do it on a daily basis. Any water in the system can cause some real problems. Next thing we want to do, and again, depends on the model you have. On this particular model, for cooling purposes, it's pulling air in through the top grates here and out the sides of the machine. So you want to make sure your grate on top is cleaned off so it doesn't impair the airflow, as well as underneath here you would take these panels off, flip your radiators up and oil coolers up. If you're cleaning that out in the morning, you want to use air to blow that out, because if you use water and it doesn't dry properly, the dirt will stick to it. So if you only have a hose, I would do that at the end of the day or lunchtime before you take your lunch break, so it has some time to dry off and dirt doesn't get stuck to it. And you may have different style doors in the back here. Some of our doors, the older ones, had a lock on them. Some of them are like this. Some don't have anything on them, but they all pull off. You can store them on the side of the machine while you're doing work under there. The next thing you want to do on a daily basis, let me just say, as you're walking around the machine, do a visual check on the machine. Make sure there's no hoses hanging off, there's no leaks anywhere. On this machine, your hydraulic level has a sight gauge on the side here. So with the boom all the way down and the bucket rolled back, you should see hydraulic fluid in here. If not, you need to add hydraulic fluid, which is a Bobcat branded hydraulic fluid. Another very important thing to do, which a lot of times is overlooked, is greasing your grease fittings. So in general, everywhere there's a pivot point on the machine, there's going to be a grease fitting. So you would need a grease gun. So as you walk around the machine, everywhere there's a pivot point, there's a grease fitting. So a couple of the grease fittings that people miss are on your Bobcat levers here. So there are grease fittings on the side on this machine. Some of the machines have it on the back. They're missed, so what happens over time, when you put your pins up and down, they bind up, and you definitely don't want to be banging on the bottom of the pins to damage your Bobcat, so just make sure they get greased. Another thing you want to keep your eye on a daily basis is your air cleaners. You don't want to pull your air cleaners apart unless you get an indication in the screen to do it. A code will come up. One thing that's missed a lot of times, if you have air conditioning on the machine, on the side of your machine you have recirculation filters, clean air filters. So you take the cover off here, there's actually a paper filter inside there. You can tap out, get the dust out of it, put it back. Your regular air cleaners for the machine, you don't want to change those unless you're told to do it with a code on the screen. So there's an outer and an inner air cleaner, and those you don't want to bang out. You want to replace those with new Bobcat air cleaners. So there's an outer filter. When you change that, every 3 times you change the outer filter, you would change the inner filter. That's something else you want to keep an eye on a daily basis. The more you run your machine, you'll get to know it. You'll kind of get an idea when something doesn't feel right. So if you hear an audible beeping or you notice something just doesn't feel right in the machine, depends what gauge package you have. If you have the basic gauge package, on the right hand side you would have a key, instead of the deluxe panel here. So if you have a key on the left panel, the button all the way to the right, you toggle yourself through the gauges, through the screens, and there's going to be a active code screen. So you'll see what code is up there on the screen. If you have the deluxe panel on the right hand side, you scroll across the bottom until you get to active warnings, and any active warning codes will be up there in the screen. So to the right of the operator, we have this little condensed operator's guide. You flip into the page with the codes in it, and you can see what the problem is. It's not necessarily that you can fix the machine, but at least you have a knowledge of what's wrong with it, so when you call into the service department, your service department, Best Line service department, you have an idea what the problem is. You can tell them what's going on in the machine. Something else I want to bring to your attention in here, a lot of operators don't know it's even here. To the right of the seat, there's a little red knob underneath the seat bar. If you were running the machine and had the boom up in the air, you have an engine failure, run out of fuel, and the machine shuts down, the boom is going to stay in the air. It can get a little claustrophobic because you can't open the door with the boom in the air. So to get out of your machine, you would pull the knob up a quarter turn, which will drift your boom down to the ground, and then you can get out of your machine safely. As an operator, the next thing you want to do is do a 50-hour check on your machine, which is a fairly simple check. Again, you want to do a visual walk around, make sure there's no broken hydraulic lines. You don't have lines leaking or anything. You have to make somebody aware of that. And one thing to point out, if you happen to be trying to find a hydraulic leak on a machine that has just been run or is running, you don't want to use your hand. So if you see a hydraulic leak somewhere, take a piece of cardboard and use that. If you have a pinhole in a hydraulic line, it can actually puncture your skin because of the pressure that's under. So just a word of precaution. So at 50 hours, you want to do a visual check of your track system. So on the Bobcat system, very rigid, heavily built, you want to do a visual check of your actual rubber tracks, which has steel inside. So it's normally got some kind of cuts in the track. You just want to make sure you don't have any severe cuts that may break over time. And at 50 hours, you want to check the track tension. So if you look at the operator's manual, it'll tell you how to do it. That tells you to get the whole machine off the ground. In the real world, what most guys do is have a bucket on the front of the machine, roll the bucket forward to get the front of the machine off the ground. And then in your center roller, you take a measurement of how much the track drops down beneath that roller. If it's dropping down more than 3/4 of an inch, you want to take a grease gun and tighten your tracks up, which on this particular machine, you open this panel up right here, and there'll be one grease fitting in there to both tension the tracks, and if you loosen the fitting up to take the tracks off, it'll loosen the tracks. The older machines will have two fittings in there, one to pump the grease up and one to let it out. So that's basically what you're doing for your 50-hour service. I'm going to point out something to you. And again, this is one of the Tier 4 later model machines. If you happen to have an interim Tier 4 or a Tier 3 machine, your muffler, at the bottom of the muffler will be a little port that you can unscrew, and that's a maintainable piece. So that's a spark arrestor muffler. Every 100 hours, you should take an operator with a block of wood, cover up the exhaust, pull out that little access, and have the operator start the machine and run it for a few minutes. That'll blow out any kind of carbon that's in that spark arrestor muffler. So this, because it's Tier 4, doesn't have that. I'm just pointing that out for older machines. Another thing to be aware of at 250 hours, and again, every machine is different, so check your operator's manual. A lot of the older machines, engine oil and filter gets changed at 250 hours. This particular one's probably 500 hours. Some of the new R-Series machines is 1,000 hours now. Once you get above the 500-hour service intervals, you want to call Best Line Equipment to come out and do your higher interval changes. The 500-hour and 1,000-hour interval changes, a little bit more involved that you don't want to be doing out in the field. Things like changing the fluid in the drive motors, checking the torque of the bolts in the drive motors. Your hydraulic system needs to be flushed. A lot of major things that you don't want to be doing in the field. So call Best Line Equipment. A lot of these things also, when you check your manual, even if it says do it at 250 hours, if you don't hit that many hours in a year, you want to do it on an annual basis. Save yourself time and longevity of the machine. And I'm Chris Stemler from Best Line. Thanks for watching today. If you have service questions, sales questions, call your local branch. We cover most of Pennsylvania and be happy to help.